Hello everybody. Here I'm back again with a new soundbite. It's been a good while. The reason for this is that I have not been really active on any media in the recent couple of weeks simply because I had a visitor and I was busy elsewhere. But now I'm back. I did an unboxing yesterday of an expansion for Runebound second edition, and I kind of hinted at the fact that I was going to do a soundbite on something that has been on my mind for quite a while, and it's redshirting, chaosbagging, and questing. And I'm going to talk about game mechanics that put people off so badly of a game that they will not even give it a second chance. Now, in the past, I was quite resistant to this. I remember the first time I read about the Lord of the Rings, the living card game, and I came across the idea of questing. And I've said this before, there was this huge debate, I believe it was on Board Game Geek, where people simply said, this is not a game mechanic, this is not thematic, why would anybody go questing? That never happens in The Lord of the Rings or in The Hobbit. Which is, thematically completely wrong, obviously, because The Lord of the Rings is one long quest with very, very, very little fighting, until you get to the final fight at the Pelennor Fields, and then you've got smaller skirmishes. You've got the fight that happens in Gondor when Minas Tirith is under siege. You do have battles, and you have at the end of the day the War of the Ring, but a lot of the time the characters are traveling, they are trying to stay alive, they are running from someone. Nobody actually confronts the ring rates until they reach Weathertop, and even there it's a very, very short fight. And then there is the next one, which isn't even like, they don't come to blows at the Bruinen either. Basically the river sweeps them away. And there are some fights with orcs, but even the stuff that happens with, and you hear a cat in the background, this is Chits and Cats after all, and even the fight that happens between the Rohirrim and the band of orcs that have abducted Merry and Pippin is hinted at, but it's not a full blow-by-blow description as you might see it in the actual movies. When you look at the Peter Jackson films, especially the third one, it's just one big, long, drawn-out battle, and it to me, created battle fatigue. I like this one the least, and when I watch the DVD, I basically fast forward because I'm not really interested in that kind of thing. But this whole idea of people going on a quest is, of course, on the one hand, something that happens in The Lord of the Rings, but also in The Hobbit, when Gandalf actually leaves the dwarves and goes someplace else to do his job. As we find out, he fights the necromancer of Dol Guldur. But questing happens all the time. So anybody who says it's not thematic for The Lord of the Rings obviously has never read Tolkien and hasn't really understood Tolkien's storyline, because this idea of a knight errant, of somebody being sent out to fulfill a task, and the task that is appointed to Frodo is obviously to bear the ring and to destroy it in Mount Doom, is at the heart of his story. So a lot of people thought this was unthematic and really hated the game for it. But to me, it never really bothered me. The next topic that was brought up was the so-called redshirting topic. Now, I had to look up redshirting because I'd never heard that term before. But it essentially deals with the fact that in order to play, allegedly, The Lord of the Rings, a living card game, you need to have loads of chump blockers that you throw at the enemies, because your heroes will be off questing. And so, no, Arathorn doesn't get to do anything really funny or really, really great. He doesn't get to fight because he's out there questing. And there is a whole article on the redshirting in Lord of the Rings, a living card game, on the internet, and you can actually look it up. And it's quite well written. But when I read it, and it got a lot of positive comments, and a lot of people agreed with it, I disagree with it. But I have no reason to debate the author's feelings, because of course he's totally wrong. Even in the base game, you don't need to redshirt. I mean, there is a series of videos on YouTube, Off the Cuff Gaming is the channel, where the player uses the Tea Party, that's Theodred, Eowyn and Aragorn from the base game, and he sends them on, I think, the whole Mirkwood cycle and possibly even into the Moria cycle. And he manages to do this. He doesn't win every single quest. I don't think he wins Dol Guldur, but then you can't, whoever wins it when they're on their own with just one-handed play, except Glaurung, and he admits that he does cheat at the beginning because he actually picks his hero that gets kidnapped, and he doesn't leave it to chance. He doesn't win every single quest, but he is very, very successful, because even in the base game, you can keep the redshirting to a minimum. If you have Theodred and Aragorn in the same party, Theodred goes on the quest, Eowyn goes on the quest, Aragorn goes on the quest. Theodred wins an additional resource, which he gives to Aragorn, which Aragorn spends to ready himself. So you have 3 characters questing, but only 2 are exhausted. So even in the base game, with a minimum set of cards, you can avoid redshirting. So obviously, this guy who really beats down on the game and says, it's redshirting, it's terrible, my heroes don't get to do heroic things, I have to have allies for everything, it's terrible, obviously says so because he didn't immerse himself in the game, and he certainly didn't give it the attention it requires to find out the finer things about the rules and to really understand how to use the cards. And I think that's a problem with any LCG or most card games, I guess, that you really have the problem that you're overwhelmed by the number of cards, and it takes you a while to understand the combinations. Now, I'm guilty of this myself, because there is a game that I really, 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 really dislike, and that's the Arkham Horror Living card game. I bought it before Christmas. It took a long while to arrive, and when I finally got it, I played it 4 times, and I was absolutely underwhelmed. I mean, that doesn't even cover it. The game, for me, was a non-starter. It wasn't immersive. I was bored throughout. It was really like, oh, now I draw a card. Oh, look, it's a monster. Oh, now I get attacked. Oh, now I do a skill test. Oh, now I have the chaos bag. Oh, I lose. Great. Rinse and repeat. Now, you could take this description minus the chaos bag, and you could apply it to the Lord of the Rings LCG, because it's the same thing. You draw an encounter card after you've committed to a quest. You experience that encounter, you deal with it, rinse and repeat. You get resources, you buy you spend them to get cards on the table, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Of course, it also didn't help that they just basically decided to take the names of cards like Unexpected Courage, which is such an important and powerful card. I mean, every LOTA LCG player worships this card. What did they do? They just took the same card name and stuck it on a different card in a different game. I thought, okay, how lame is this? I have overcome this feeling, because when I look at the Middle-earth CCG, it's got so many cards whose names have simply been transferred to the Lord of the Rings LCG that I can now forgive them for ripping off my Lord of the Rings LCG names and putting them onto cards in Arkham Horror. But what really put me off and what really destroyed Arkham Horror, the LCG, for me totally, was the Chaos Bag mechanic. Now, in that particular game, for those of you who don't know it, you have skill tests. So you have different types of skills. I think one is brain, so basically intelligence, swiftness, agility. I believe you also have a prowess, where you basically hit someone for fighting and stuff like that. And you have a basic skill, and you can add to it. So each character has those, and you can add to it by using particular cards or committing cards, and people can spend cards essentially to help you with a skill check. And then you have to meet a certain target. And in addition to committing cards and using your own skills, your basic skills that you have, you also have to draw from a chaos bag. It can also be a chaos cup, I guess, but usually it's called chaos bag. It doesn't come with the game, which I thought was lame in a way. But okay. And you have tokens that you put in there, and you have plus tokens, 0 tokens, minus tokens, and then I believe 3 additional types of tokens. And one of them is an auto fail, and then one is a wild card. And what this wild card does when you draw it from the bag depends on the game that you're playing. There's a separate card which actually explains what happens. So you could have prepped really well for a particular encounter and for a particular skill check. And then what happens? You plunge your hand into the bag and you draw out a token. And you might get an auto fail, or you might get a -2. You fail the skill check. All the cards that you have committed are forfeit, and you haven't done anything. So you've basically lost your turn, and you've probably lost precious cards. And for me, that was totally unacceptable. It is totally thematic because Lovecraft's idea is that human beings are just, tiny little ants that crawl on the face of the earth, and you have those high powers, those ancient ones, those gods that basically launched themselves into space and traveled eons ago, and some of them landed on Earth, and probably there are different stories as to how mankind came to be, but in one of the stories he describes how mankind was essentially created as a byproduct or a botched experiment by this greater race, and we're just basically worthless little ants essentially, and we mean nothing. We have no meaning, and of course the world outside and the universe is so big, and it's reigned by chaos. And of course, in that sense, the chaos bag makes perfect sense, because the best laid plans of mice and men, and then God or chaos or fate comes in and just crushes you. Not a problem. Thematically, totally sound. But to me, it totally ruined the game. It ruined the game in several ways. Number one, I have come to dislike custom-made components, aid components. I mean, of course, when you have a game, lots of things will be just made for this game. The game board, maybe meeples or little standees or little miniatures, the cards, of course, that come with the game. But those are the main components. Aid components, such as dice, for example, I prefer not to be custom made. Because if you lose a die, and that does happen, sometimes it means you can't really play the game anymore. For example, if you lose one of the dice in Descent or Descent Second Edition, you essentially cannot play the game. You would have to either replace them, and replacement dice, I tried to get them, but the last time I tried, they were out of stock. And they're also quite expensive. The same goes also for the dice in Mansions of Madness. I'm not happy that they are custom made. I would have preferred like generic 8-sided dice or something, but they are not generic. They are unique dice, and if you lose one of them, well, you could always roll the ones that you have more often. In Descent, essentially, since a lot of the dice are different, you really need to have all of them. So having those custom-made components can be a big issue. In this age of apps, of course, you have die rolling apps, and there is one for Descent Second Edition, and I'm pretty sure that there is one for Mansions of Madness as well. Interestingly enough, Mansions of Madness Second Edition, although it's completely app-driven, does not have a die roller in the app, which I thought was a bit odd, but, there you go. So the problem with the chaos tokens is, of course, if you lose one, and I've watched many playthroughs of this game, and every so often on YouTube, obviously, and so often you see somebody pulling out the chit, saying, oh, okay, it's a +2, yeah, I pass, putting the chit on the table, not putting it back in the bag. This has two results. Number one, the next time somebody draws, the probabilities are skewed, and number two, it's so easy to just drop a chit. I mean, the other day I found one of the standees from my Mansions of Madness game on the floor. I hadn't played since Christmas. I have no idea how it got there. It was lying on the floor. So I put it back, and I was happy that I'd found it and not one of my cats and had basically chewed it up. But a chit can get lost so quickly. And if you don't, and I mean, there is plenty of chits in this game. So if you don't realize this, you might be playing, and you could be playing completely wrongly with a distorted probability. And you can't really replace them, because when you put your hand in the bag and you pull out the chit and you feel for the chits in there, if there is one that you made yourself, you will not get the same cardstock and everything. You can tell which one it is, so you won't draw this one if it's the one that actually is the auto kill. So I'm just underwhelmed by this from a purely component based perspective. But I also thought, although I understand it thematically, from a game mechanic perspective, it totally ruined the game for me. I felt like this is a cheap way of introducing randomness, which could have been introduced in a very different way if they wanted randomness, like using shadow cards, for example, which can be mitigated as well, or even just rolling a die. It just felt so totally over engineered and lazy. Oh yeah, we want to make sure that people can get really screwed, so let's put this in. I don't know. If I really want to feel bad and feel, like all the powers have aligned themselves against me, I'll play Arkham Horror, the board game. I don't need an LCG for this. When I play an LCG, I play for immersion. I want to tell a story even more than I want with the Arkham Horror, the board game. An LCG, if it's a good LCG, will tell a story. And then I don't want to have like mechanics that actually bring me out. And I don't know, it was just a really terrible experience for me. And so I sold the game within 3 weeks from getting it. I was very disappointed. However, that taught me one thing. I'm not immune to this. Oh my God, there may be a game mechanic out there that is so terrible, in my opinion, that it will totally ruin a game for me. So I totally feel for the redshirter, because he really, really, really hated the game as it presented itself to him. Just like I could not see beyond the chaos bag mechanic to really get into the Arkham Horror LCG and give it its due, because I'm pretty sure it's a good game. It has a big following as far as I can tell, even just looking at the number of playthroughs you find on YouTube, and I do occasionally watch them. I watch the guys in Canada. I think it's called Playing Board Games, their channel, and they play it on a regular basis, semi-regular basis. And I think I've watched every single playthrough they've ever put out, and I think they've played every scenario at least 3 times at this stage. And it's probably a really good game. I just couldn't get over the chrome, the mechanics that ruined the game for me. Just like the guy with the redshirting couldn't get over this redshirting effect, which doesn't exist as he describes it, because even in the base game, you can prevent it from happening. There are mechanics in there that stop it from happening, like unexpected courage, which allows you to basically unexhaust a character once you've committed it to doing something, or even like the tea party combo that I described earlier. But he was so put off by it that he couldn't look beyond it. And I think that's quite interesting, because, and now my cat has learned how to turn on the TV and has decided to watch 13 Reasons Why. Yeah, maybe I should do a Soundbites about this one, because that was a really odd series. Anyways, yes, I've got Netflix now, by the way. So I've finally arrived in the 21st century, as somebody said. Now, if I can learn how to use my smartphone correctly, I might actually, earn my nerd credits in the 21st century. I've got them from the 80s when I started working in computers and having computers in 1981. I started with a Commodore 64, and this is not what this topic is about, but, I need to brush up on my nerd credits to reach the 21st century nerdiness that I want. Anyways, back to the topic. So essentially, for those of you who really didn't like my Arkham Horror LCG review, sorry about that. I cannot go back to the game. I'm too caught up in my hatred of this particular mechanic. For everyone who doesn't like the Lord of the Rings LCG because of the redshirting, I totally hear you. I can assure you that redshirting can be overcome quite easily, just as probably the Chaos Bag hatred could be overcome. But I think what I would like to know from you guys is, are there any game mechanics that you really hate? So for example, there was this huge debate on Board Game Geek about, is it okay to roll to move? And I was like, I don't even understand why this is a topic. But again, it's a game mechanic that a lot of people seem to hate. So, but it also shows that there is a plethora of game mechanics out there, which are in and of themselves quite unique in that they are so distinct that people will actually use them to determine whether they like a game. Like worker placement as well, I think, but that's not even just a mechanic. That's not just an isolated mechanic. That is essentially what the game is about. So I think that's a different topic. So yeah, I just really wanted to talk about this because I felt a lot of people were very unhappy with my Arkham Horror LCG review. It is what it is. I stand by it. I really don't like the game, but I would also like to say, just because somebody says, oh, I don't like a game, that's just like their opinion, man. You know, you can like it. But what I'm trying to say is, I really understand now why somebody would be so annoyed about a game that I really love, LOTR LCG, because of a mechanic they cannot reconcile themselves with. So yeah, that's all for now, and I wish you all a pleasant evening. You know, that was a really rambling episode, but I really wanted to talk about it. So I'll talk to you soon, and hopefully this weekend I might be getting some Runebound Island of Dread in. I did do the hunting phase for my Halikarnassos settlement for Kingdom Death Monster. However, it was just so short that I didn't really film it. It took me all of 10 minutes, and if even, and a lot of this was set up and still, you know, getting the cards right and stuff. So next up, we will be hunting a level 1 lion. So stay tuned for that, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.